Good day, my name is Kevin S. Briones from the Philippine State College of Aeronautics. I will be presenting our research study entitled The Analysis of the Effects of Flexible Operations for the New Normal Guidelines in Selected Air Freight Forwarding Companies. The study I and my group mates conducted is all about how the COVID-19 pandemic affected logistics in air freight in terms of warehouse operations domestically and globally, and I will be tackling the measures that were done to counter the effects of the pandemic as we proceed. First of all, what is the New Normal Guidelines? These are the guidelines implemented by the government that help control and prevent the spread of the virus at a work setting. In order to abide with the implemented guidelines, companies came up with strategies like working remotely and adjusting shift rotations. With the new normal guidelines implemented, things like social distancing, wearing masks, temperature screening, and so much more became mandatory. For our research study, we have 3 items for the statement of the problem. Number 1 is what are the changes in warehousing facilities of selected air freight forwarding companies in compliance with the flexible operations. The second one is what are the effects and issues of flexible operations under the new normal guidelines on the warehousing facilities of selected air freight forwarding companies. And for the third is what are the recommendations of warehouse personnel on the flexible operations imposed. And for the first and second statement of the problem, we will be using 4 variables to distinguish the changes and effects. And these variables are working practices and productivity, inventory management, safety and security, and occupational safety and health measures. For our study's theoretical framework, we use Duchek's resilience model, which is all about companies or businesses handling unexpected events, which in this case is the COVID-19 pandemic. The model starts with anticipation, which will be done before the event occurs. Next is the coping stage during the unexpected event, and lastly is the adaptation, which will be at the latter part of the unexpected event. For our conceptual framework, with the flexible operations implied in the companies that participated in our study, we used 4 variables which to distinguish the effects and changes in terms of their performance, and after all that was done, we used our findings to formulate conclusions and recommendations. The method we used for our research design is the descriptive method and analysis. First, we drew out our objectives, collected the necessary data, organized and cleaned the data, analyzed the data, interpreted the results, and lastly, we communicated the results. For our hypothesis, we believe that there were changes in the warehouse operations of air freight forwarding companies during and after the pandemic in compliance to the new normal guidelines. Descriptive analysis and descriptive statistics, including the 4-point Likert scale, was used for our data analysis. The sampling technique we used for our study was convenience sampling, in which involved non-random selection of respondents based on our convenience. Next, we will be handling the results of the study we conducted. We had 4 companies to participate in our study, which are NES Cargo Express with the number of participants, which is 13, Rapid Incorporated 18, F2 Logistics 20, Cebu Pacific 10, which is a total of 61 respondents. When it comes to changes and effects in selected companies with the implementation of flexible operations in terms of working practices and productivity, our participants show that they are highly aware of these changes and effects. The changes and effects in the selected companies with the implementation of flexible operations in terms of inventory management, our respondents show that they are highly aware of these changes and effects. The changes and effects in the selected companies with the implementation of flexible operations in terms of safety and security, our respondents show that they are highly aware of these changes and effects. The changes and effects in the selected companies with the implementation of flexible operations in terms of occupational safety and health measures, our respondents show that they are highly aware of these changes and effects. Next is the conclusion of our study. For the profile of the respondents, each company and their respondents have differences not greater than 10 or 16.4%. For the changes in warehousing facilities of selected air freight forwarding companies in compliances with the flexible operations, our respondents are highly aware. These modifications in the organization are linked to the workflow of the warehouse personnel as well as their workflow, productivity, and discipline in regard to interacting with each other on site and how they act upon the new practices instructed to them as a result of the flexible operations. These changes are also interrelated with the company's way of adapting to unexpected events as a response that acts as a countermeasure to the constraints affecting their organization. The changes are most prevalently seen on the warehousing facilities, which involves numerous alterations, practices to expand the prevention of hazards and accidents in the workplace, and additional planning and supply of new equipment and materials to comply with the flexible operations such as sanitizing equipment, thermometer for temperature screening, and other disinfection tools keep the workplace and employees away from the existing virus and other possible diseases as well. Next is the effects and issues of flexible operations under the new normal guidelines on the warehousing facilities of selected air freight forwarding companies, which our respondents also show that they are highly aware of these effects. The previously mentioned adjustments that demonstrated changes in the companies caused several effects in the warehouse personnel and warehouse facilities. It is mostly directed to organization of employees and precision in accomplishing tasks with flexible operations, improved management and accuracy in inventory, enhanced housekeeping observation, and developed safety and security of the facilities due to the new protocols that has to be followed under the flexible operations of the new normal guidelines. In line with the garnered data and overall results, these effects are positive in general. For the most part, issues or problems were not encountered. Therefore, to conclude, the problem statement about the effects of flexible operation with the implementation of the new normal guidelines, for the most part, flexible operations inflicted positive effects to the air freight forwarding companies. Lastly will be the recommendations of our study. Based on the data gathered and analyzed, I and my groupmates came up with 5 recommendations, and 4 of them were selected by our participants, which are continuous practice and observation of safety and health measures, such as sanitizing, temperature screening, presentation of documents, wearing of masks, and or social distancing in the workplace. Second is maintaining the sanitizing of equipment and tools to preserve proper hygiene and disinfection on the job site. Third is mandatory health checkups or assessments to prevent further risks or exposure to possible disease and lessen the chances of being infected by the virus. Fourth is keeping working arrangements with teleworking is less likely recommended by the participants. Us, the researchers, still recommend this type of setup. That concludes my presentation for today. Thank you so much for listening.